Okay. Welcome to the Tampa Bay IIBA Florida chapter. This is our study group for April, I think is the 25th of 2024. This is our 117th class. Today we're going to interview Patty Soltis, who's going to talk about the awareness of goals and alignment to some that need the reminder. This is pretty much the goals of upper management and how to talk to them. So I'm really excited to hear this from Patty. My name is Thea Soren. I'm the Vice President of Career and Professional Development for our chapter. It is my job to help you. If you need mentoring, coaching, a review of user stories, whatever you need, that's what I'm here for. I need you to reach out to me through LinkedIn and tell me what you need, and we'll get it done for you. Our board is led by volunteers. I'm a board member. Cliff is our president. Yulia is our vice president of finance. And then we have 4 illustrious members who are board members at large who have stepped up to help us make our chapter the very best it can be. Our mission is to help business analysts worldwide. It doesn't matter if you live in Florida or in Africa. We have members from every country in the world almost, and we're working on providing services and education and uplifting everyone that we can. If you don't have an IIBA chapter home, you're welcome to join our family. We've given you several ways to reach us. This is our Thursday evening study group from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. We also have LinkedIn groups, meetup groups. We have our Zoom online. It's the same address every week. We have study group materials, including materials created by our members and guests, things that help them through their certification study and help them with just the presentations. We also have our meetings recorded on IIBA on YouTube under IIBA Tampa Bay videos, and we have our IIBA website. We typically focus on the top 3 of these certifications. IIBA has 7 different certifications. The top 3 are based out of the BABOK, the Business Analysis Book of Knowledge, and those are the ones we focus on the most. But we also have our professional series, and we occasionally will delve into some of the other 4 certifications. If you have any questions, reach out to me. We want to celebrate the wins here. Our most recent person to pass their CBAP certification is Esther. Esther is not only part of our board members at large, but she says that our chapter, our study group, has helped her pass her certification. So we want to celebrate that. Esther has also volunteered to be one of our study group advisors. These are the folks who have committed to attending the study group meetings, which means that you, as a participant, get 1 hour of education credit for participating in our study group. And so we keep roll whenever it's time for you to apply for your certification, and you have to identify how you got your study credit or education credit. You can reach out to us and we can give you a list. It helps us if you can tell us which ones you remember participating in, so we look in the right places. Watermark Learning has been our constant companion throughout this venture, all 117 classes so far. They've given us a discount code, so you can get 20% off of any of your purchases. They have project management, business analysis, and several other categories of products. They've got classes, they've got flashcards, they've got practice test questions. Whatever you need, they might have it. So check it out and use your 20% off. Today, we're going to have Patty talk about the awareness of goals and alignment to some that need the reminder. Next week, we have Lynn going to talk about UX and UI. And the week after that, I'm going to bring the Build Your Best Toolkit presentation that I recently gave at the Building Business Continuity Conference in Orlando. So I'm going to turn the screen over to Patty and give you a chance to show us your presentation.
Okay, first thing you got to do is unmute yourself, huh?
Every time.
I know, right? You would think after all this time, because I've been doing Zoom meetings for longer than the pandemic, you would think after all this time I would have that down, and I still don't have that down.
It's okay.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
We can.
Yes. Okay, great. All right. So as Thea did such a wonderful introduction, this is really about understanding the goals and the objectives of the C-suite, because a lot of us sit in roles where it just feels like we're misunderstood. Maybe our services aren't maximized. in what we can do and often not listened to. So I put this together for a group of customer experience professionals. I work in the customer experience field technically, although I call myself a growth strategist. But I put this together for a group of customer experience professionals, and it's really helped a lot of people figure out how they actually fit in with all of this. So our goal here is really just about how do we look at what are the goals of the organization and how do we align ourselves to them. So a great starting point for this, let's see what happens when I click. There we go. We kind of talked about that already. So a great starting point for this is to really get into the, there we go, is to really get into what it is the priorities are. And Gartner came out with this information. It was in January of last year. And the thing that they noted is that growth, workforce, and technology are the top three things that any CEO and CFO are thinking about in their day-to-day jobs. They're thinking about it as they're putting together long-term strategies. It's those three things that really rise to the top when they're thinking about what the priorities are for their organization. And so I thought that was kind of interesting to see this. And I just recently read a McKinsey study. I read it last weekend, and they said it's holding on. So from July to April, which is what, like 10 months, 9 months? You guys are business analysts. You guys know better than I do to do that fast math. But those are still remaining the top goals for CEOs and what the big things are that they are looking for. So as we look at that, and as we look at those three things and we start to think about what do they mean, the first one is to really look at growth. And this is the number one thing that CEOs are looking at and CFOs are looking at, which means that's what's drilling down through the organization. And you can see from here, this is from KPMG, and 84% of CEOs are confident in growth prospects in the country. 79% are confident in their growth prospects inside their company, and 77 are confident in growth prospects of the global economy. Once again, I just read this. I think it was another, gosh, who was it? I forget if it was Price Waterhouse, somebody. I just read another study, and those are pretty much holding true as well. Most CEOs are still feeling pretty confident about growth, which is interesting given, the economy and what's been happening and all the things that are happening out there in the world. But they're really holding on to their optimism with growth, which is something for all of us to be aware of and what they're looking at. And as they're looking at this, they're thinking about too, how are they going to have the workforce to be able to support that growth? So that's where this becomes really the number two thing that they're looking at. And they're looking at that because they're looking at that through a lens of what kind of collaborative leadership do they need to bring, which is always my thing of, how much are they going to walk the talk on this one? But how much collaborative leadership are they going to bring? And what kind of talent and culture are they going to create inside their organization? And 75% of US CEOs, they agree that collaborative leadership really enables greater success. So we're going to hope that that is something they're going to actually walk the talk on with that. And 83% of CEOs think that talent and culture really enable growth inside an organization. And those two numbers are both according to a 2023 Fortune and Deloitte.
Instant boner. Can't even walk. This one's and it's
Derek?
super comfortable.
Okay, Derek is muted.
Derek got excited about that.
Yes.
Very good. And I was just actually reading, Gallup came out with something this week, and they said that there in the US workforce, there's 4.8 million employees that are less engaged. So this is going to be a struggle for a lot of CEOs. And Manpower also came out with a study last week, and they said that 70% of recruiters in the US are struggling right now, which is a really big number. So this is a big deal and something to think about. And something to keep in mind that CEOs have got their brains wrapped around. The third thing to think about with this right here is technology. And you can't have a conversation with anybody anymore without talking about technology or talking about AI, certainly. With the emergence of Gen AI, this is something that's really come into a big topic everywhere. And the CEOs are really looking at this, and they're thinking about how Gen AI is going to really accelerate things like innovation, really how effectively are they going to use it? How's it going to help product get to market faster? How's it going to help product grow? What does market growth look like and how much faster can that help with it? And really what it's all leading up to is how can AI help profitability? Like that's the piece that it's all leading up to. And you can see from the other chart that's on here, once again, this is from the Fortune Deloitte study, that the things that the CEOs are really looking at with this. Increasing efficiency, 79% of them are looking for it with that. Automating manual operations, 75% of them need that. So you can see the different pieces right there that the CEOs, they're really thinking about in their day-to-day life about what Gen AI should be able to do inside their business. And like I said, you can't have a conversation with somebody anymore without talking about Gen AI. It's just literally almost impossible to have a conversation with somebody. So as we look at this and we think about it, and whether you're working with a CEO, you're working with a department head or anything like that, getting that understanding of what their job is about and what they are working on and working toward is something that can really help you inside your role. I believe that empathy is something that is just a key factor for us to bring in. And we all sit in these roles where we are basically in servant leadership roles, and the people inside the organization become our customers. So understanding their jobs and roles can be really, really helpful. And when you think about CEOs are out there, and what they're doing is they're taking bold and decisive action. They're really embracing equity, purpose, sustainability, and they're doing all this to just push that growth and get to those growth ambitions that they're trying to do it. And ultimately what it comes down to is how are they reducing risk? How are they operating in strategic uncertainty with the firmest of business cases? So you guys as business analysts, this is something you can really help with, is help reduce that risk and help the organization understand what it is that what they're up against. So as we look at this and we look at what the CEO really does, and it comes down to these 16 things. And this, I think this is from, I have to look and see, I think this was from, okay, that's what I thought. This is from McKinsey. Because I found this, I thought this was such a great chart to see that the CEOs are really looking at 6 different things. And inside of each of those 6 different things, there's 3 other components. They've got 18 deliverables that they're working on. And you can see what those are right there. I'm not a person who's going to read the slides to you, but it really comes down to how's the CEO going to get results? And they're going to get it through all these different pieces here and doing all the things that you see there around this here. And I have a really good quote. This is from Fleming Ornskopf. I hope I said that right. I don't think he'll ever know if I did or not, but you just hope you got it right. Anyway, he's the CEO of the he's the CEO of the Swiss pharmaceutical company, Galderma. And he said the main job of a CEO is just to do better to do better this year than you did last year. So that's like their main function they're focused on. So you can see where growth, where workforce culture, and how technology fits inside of that piece right there. And then if we kind of just take a quick look at what are some of the challenges that CEOs are facing, you can see from the word cloud here that geopolitics is a really big one. And only 38% of CEOs are confident in geopolitical instability. And 57% indicated that they are not all that sure about geopolitical instability and inflation. And so you can see that then we've got uncertainty, a big one, the economy, a big one. And that kind of ties back into 36% of them being confident with the financial and market instability. 63% of them are confident with inflation, which means they think it's going to just keep on going. And 53% were expecting a recession. I'd like to know the updated number on that recession, because this is from last summer. Everybody went into 2023 thinking this massive recession was going to come. And there are some indicators out there of it, but the one that was predicted didn't quite get to the level that it got to. So I'd like to see some updated ones on this, but I still think it's interesting to especially focusing on this word cloud here and look at that and see the things that are on the minds of CEOs and what kind of things are they thinking about in terms of what challenges are out there. And you can certainly see we've got growth, we've got workforce engagement, and tech is just going to fire through every single one of these things that are on here and how we're using tech to get to these things. So if we take a look at what's next and we look at the person who controls the purse strings in an organization, and that's really the CFO, and really understanding that CFO role, because when we all need money for something, what do? We go to our financial partners and try and pull money from them. And I loved this quote right here. A CFO who can listen to a new business case, innately understand the financial impact that will have on your strategic aims, and communicate those in ways simple to understand. I thought that was such a great quote because it's so easy for us to talk in our own language. And for a CFO, I mean, they're so involved in things that like a lot of people maybe not completely understand, but they really have to translate that. They have to be a good enough storyteller to turn that into something that's easy for other people to understand. So they have to know their numbers. They have to be spot on with them. They have to create that great story. They have to avoid the accounting jargon and really just keep their comments honest and objective, which I think is a really hard thing to do because it's so easy to get bias that creeps in to different situations. So if we look at what the CFO does, the CFO has got these elements right inside of here. And this is these are really the big things that a CFO is looking at inside of here. And they're really in there, and the CFO is that strategic partner that sits at the center of it. Of course, they're going to be concerned about growth and the financial health of the organization. They need to know what's happening with customers and competition and inside the market. They have to be able to understand risk. So they've got to be able to put all this together, and they need to be really strong at being a calculated risk taker. And once again, I'm guessing that's where you all come in many different ways, is helping the organization understand, how do you take calculated risk? Because I like to say, we throw spaghetti on the wall all the time, but we can throw spaghetti on the wall, and we can throw a certain amount of spaghetti on the wall. We can have a target that we're aiming it at. We can know how sticky the spaghetti is. We can know how much spaghetti we're expecting it to stick. Like, there's all these other pieces that you can put in, and that's how you can take a good calculated risk and not just give it a toss and see what's actually going to stick. And that's what a CFO is actually doing. That kind of pulls together for you all quite a bit about what it is. Some of our partners, some of those other pieces, some of the things that they're thinking about and going through their mind. And like I said, I always like to bring that empathy piece in to get that understanding of what's important to the partners, and then what are their roles and responsibilities, and how are they acting inside their roles and responsibilities. So as we move forward and we look at what that number one thing is, and we look at growth. So there's a lot of ways that we can impact growth. We can provide analysis on customers, on trends, on products, expenses, all those different things that are out there. And we can certainly make that connection for the people in our organization, and we can provide them that data in a way that's easy for them to understand and really help drive that growth piece inside an organization. And if we look at it, and one of the best ways to do this is to have a strategy. And every time I flounder in my job, I don't know about you all, and I've been doing this for 37 years, so it's a long time. I got 9 years to go, just so you all know. And then that's it. But every time I flounder in my job, it's because I didn't have a strategy. I didn't have direction. And when you're putting together that strategy, and I did this a lot in my retail days, my consulting days, and I do it now in the job I do. It's always got these components to it. It's always got a value proposition inside of it. What is the value going to be of what it is that's going to happen? It's not so much an ROI, but it's that value. Like, how is it going to add value to the organization? How's it going to add value to the product life cycle? How's it going to add value to a potential risk that's could be taken? But always looking at that piece right there. And I believe everybody needs to understand customer needs. It's what Thea was talking about earlier when she was talking. Thea gave a great example in our as we were all coming in together. She was talking about how she was at a conference and there were these personas that were built, and then based on the personas, the next steps of what was going to happen to help those personas succeed was pulled together. Such a great way to look at that and really understand that piece. We have to know what resources we have, and we have to know what metrics and measures are important to our organization, and what metrics and measures are important inside our own worlds in which we live in. So all those pieces come together and just create this amazing strategy that gives you direction on what it is you're doing, where you want to go, and what you want to accomplish. And just to talk a little bit more about the value proposition, there's a couple key pieces to the value proposition. And keeping growth at the center of that value proposition and understanding the categories. And these are categories possibly that our company wants to grow, different products maybe that they're looking to grow. These could be categories that they're looking to avoid downsizing in. So there could be a couple different things inside of that. We want to look at segments. These are customer segments. So there are segments for customers. There are always customer segments that are going to be growth segments. There's going to be customer segments that are maintained segments. There's going to be customer segments that are brand new opportunity segments. They've never shopped or purchased or done business before with the organization. And then there's going to be those risk ones. And those are the segments that could possibly be going down for whatever reason it was. And just a funny little tidbit, in my retail days when I was looking at segments, one of the things I had to look at in risk were factors that had to do with divorce. My clients going to what's that called, white collar prison, anything, like there were some funny things that we had to take into consideration when we were looking at our segments with this. And yes, I had a very large customer, and this customer was like a $500,000 a year customer that went to white collar prison. So that is an actual real example, but just a little funny story to add in. We want to look at the short-term goals that are out there. We want to think about what those are, and then tie in what are we doing to help the organization achieve those short-term goals, as well as the long-term goals. It's the same thing for both of them, but it's understanding those two things and how do they come together, and how do we provide value in what we're doing to help move that growth. And of course, we need to take into account scalability. We need to take into account sustainability, looking at milestones, like what are the stops along the way to achieve these goals. And even short-term goals need a few little pit stops along the way of how they're going to get there. What kind of improvement is going to come out, and what's the timing on it? And I don't know about all of you, but I am a very impatient person. And when it comes to business, and I'm like, okay, let's just do this like now, like let's go. But you can't, as I've learned over the years, can't always do it that way. So there's a timing factor that has to come in with it. And sometimes that timing factor is taking into account internal and external things that are happening. But just a really key thing to keep in mind as we're building our value proposition are all of those things. And then as we build our value proposition, we can look at our resources. So we've got internal and external resources. Internally, we've got great data and tech that's available to us. Hopefully you guys do have that. We have, I don't know about you, but in my job, we have little stumbling blocks sometimes with these two things. There's usually a plethora of insights that are out there. We've got partners inside the organization. And that's where, if you can't get a chair sitting down at a table, who's your advocate that can get that chair and help you? Or when you need something, who's that person that can be a great resource for you? It's just really the relationships that we've built internally in our organization. Of course, human resources is always a great internal resource, especially when you think about that workforce category. Externally, there's so many things. You guys are an external resource. So there's so many great external resources that are out there. What Thea was talking about with mentoring and coaching, another great external resource that's out there. But you can see there's all these different things out there where we can access information that can be these great resources to add to the value proposition, to add to the growth of the organization, and to really add that extra layer of value to our companies with everything we do. Then as we look at our resources, we want to assess needs and look at all those things. This is what you guys do. It's the data, it's the analytics, it's the insights. Of course, I have to put the customer experience in, not just because I work in customer experience, but I've believed for 30 plus years how important the customer is. And I'm going pretty quickly, so I have time to tell you this fun little story. So when I started in retail, it was in 1987, and I became a department manager of this like little $2 million business in, it was the week after I turned 22 years old. And I was standing there one day and I was looking around. It was early in the morning and there was nobody else in the store. And I'm looking around and I'm wondering to myself, who buys this stuff? What do they do with it? And like, what's going to make them come back and buy more? And those series of questions, and there were more, those became like my driving force. All those years I was in retail to figure out what it was that was driving the customer, and that's how I did growth. And it's funny because I used that all those years, and people constantly were asking me, what is your secret? How do you do it? It was understanding the customer experience. It was so easy, but they didn't want to seem to get that. Couple key pieces inside the customer experience are voice of the customer, really understanding the data and insights that come from voice of customer, understanding the customer journey. You can take those personas that I mentioned earlier, that Thea had mentioned earlier, and build that customer journey map and understand what happens at each step along the way, from when the customer has an idea that they want to purchase to when they actually hopefully do purchase, to are they going to become an advocate for your organization. It's understanding customer segments, purchase patterns. You can get into really understanding a little bit about revenue, once again, whether this is for a department and division you're in or it's for your overall organization, but understanding the revenue, the measures, the wallet share, the market share that's out there, really getting in and understanding those pieces, and then looking at what pieces are happening in terms of retention, churn, and acquisition. And that's for customers, that's for product, that's for data, that's for a whole bunch of different pieces of what you're looking at with this as you're assessing needs. Once you've done that, you're going to look at metrics. And these are just some examples of some company metrics that a lot of organizations look at. In my retail days, we do a lot with EBITDA, and that was certainly a driving factor. It's funny because they bring it up in my company now, EBITDA, and most of the people in my group don't know what it is. And I'm like, it's earnings before interest, depreciation, tax. It's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Like this number just like rattles right off. But it's obviously an important number. But there's all these metrics that are out there, and in different organizations, there are different metrics to look at. So, for example, in retail, I was looking at sales per square foot. I was looking at turn. I was looking at sell through. I was looking at average unit sale, items per transaction, whole different set of metrics that were my company metrics. In the job that I do today, we look at something called GSV, and another, which is generated sales volume. And then we also look at something called FLE, which is freelancer earnings. Very big, important numbers inside my organization. They're not necessarily company metrics that everybody's going to look at, but everything that I do and I look at, and these are all the metrics that I look at in my customer experience world, I tie all of those right back in to the company metrics. So when I started my job at Upwork, one of the first things I did is see this NPS number right here. Oops, went the wrong way. Oh, wrong way again. There we go. That NPS number right there, that's Net Promoter Score. That's that one question that's on the survey that asks, how likely are you to recommend? So one of the things I did is I tied that number back into our revenue. So I know that our promoters spend more and our detractors spend less. And I can talk to people in my organization, and this is how I can get their attention about what I'm doing, because I have it tied back into the financial metrics of the organization. And that's something that was really helpful to tie back into. I did customer experience metrics because that's the field that I work in. Our analytics team talks a lot about many of these different things that are on here. They're talking about wallet share, they're talking about market share, they're talking about customer lifetime value, they're talking about churn. So a lot of these things, they're talking about productivity, a lot of these things really permeate throughout the organization. But I have all of these metrics that I can pick, and I can use all of them to really go back and tie into these company metrics. So it creates that connection, and it gives what I do importance and value inside the organization. Because if I go in and just talk about this, nobody cares what I have to say. But if I go in and talk about this connected to this, everybody cares about what I have to say at that point in time. So it's not about the organization understanding any of this. They don't need to understand any of this. I do, because then I need to be able to relate it to everything else that's in the organization. And it gives me value inside the organization. And what I do value, my role gets value, my voice gets value. So that's been something that's really been key for me to just catch everybody's ear. And it happened just today. I was in a meeting today with a group I've been trying to get into their meetings on, and I finally got in today, and I pulled this like a rabbit out of a hat. Just started talking away about my metrics and how they're tied to their metrics, and I had them. So I can tell you it works. Okay, so once we have all these metrics, we can tie all these things together. This is an example from when I was in retail, and I'm just going to go through this briefly, but the goal was to get to profit. Like this is when I was running a business, my goal was to get to profit. The way I got through profit was to have a great gross margin, and the way I got to a great gross margin was to have a high sell-through. way to have a high sell-through was to have productivity of my sales associates and to have traffic that was coming into my store converted into purchasing. So these were the important metrics in my organization: traffic, productivity, conversion, sell-through, gross margin, and profit. All my customer metrics flowed into these things. So when it came to traffic, the thing that I knew was that we needed to get feet in the door. And once we had them in the door, we wanted them to purchase. What I knew from our surveys was that if we were good at greeting, we could convert them. If we were great at greeting, we could really convert them. So it became a focus for us to really get into how are we greeting people and how are we getting them engaged. And that drove conversion. Conversion then drove sell-through, which drove gross margin, which drove profit. So really understanding the behavior drove that piece. You guys can do the same thing with your analytics and what you're doing and understanding how the metrics of your organization work and tie those things right inside of there. And then the last piece to all this is really how to be a great storyteller. And there's a lot of really fun pieces to being a good storyteller. And one of those is to have a call to action. And the call to action is basic. It's pretty simple. The call to action is just, what do you want people to do? That's pretty much all that is getting people engaged in what it is you need for them to understand and what action they need to take next. And in order to have a great call to action, it's having these three components: the what, the so what, and the now what. So what are you going to tell them? Why is it important with the so what? And then what are they going to do next with the now what? And those kind of things really lead to great storytelling, and it makes it poignant. And you don't really, when you're telling a good story, you don't necessarily want to tell more than 3 different things when you're telling a good story. And your story is going to consist of data, especially with what you guys do. Data is going to be a really, really big thing for you guys. So you want to tell a story that's got that. And a great way to tell that data is to do show versus tell. So if I gave an example, I talk about this in when I'm talking about customers. And I'll say that based on the current customer behavior, we are trending right now to lose 1 in 10 customers. So let's say there's 20 people in this room. Let's just take 2 of you out of here. And that's how many customers we have left. Now we have to go find 2 people to replace them, to just hold on. And then we've got to find 2 more to hit growth. And really explaining it that way helps people see, oh, like they get it then. If I just sit there and say that we turn 10%, they don't necessarily understand that. But by bringing it to life in that show versus tell, it makes a really big difference. A lot of times when storytelling, if you can put something in a customer voice, it can be helpful. And certainly to make it personal goes a really, really long way. And then having those mini stories in place, that makes such a difference. And I always like to say you want to have a few mini stories sitting in your pocket. It's like those little elevator pitches of what you're going to say to somebody when you have a few minutes to catch their attention. And the last thing that I'll say about this, and this is not on the slide, but the last thing I can say about this is when you're telling the story, find a way to connect, find a way to build an emotion into it, and or to derive an emotion out of your audience with it. Make them feel like they have to act now. Make them feel like this is going to be like a gut-wrenching, you're taking the gut-wrenching decision out of it. You can come in as the hero and make them feel better about everything they do. You can come in and certainly make them fearful that if they don't take action, that this is what's going to happen. So there's a lot of emotions that you can evoke if you're telling your story, and just grab it and go with it, because it just, people connect to that. And here's a really fun fact for you. Back in, I think it was 2003, there was a Harvard professor, and his name's Gerald, and I can never remember his last name, Zaltman, something like that. Anyway, he found that 95% of decisions are based on emotion. Can you believe that? 95% of decisions. And that's why I say, bring that emotion into it, because you're going to help people make the right decisions for what it is they're doing and where it is they're going with it. And that pretty much wraps up what it is really all about. And it just ties into understanding the priorities of your organization, understanding the roles of the people that you work with, and then aligning your strategy. And that's really how it all just comes together, and you get bigger buy-in, better value, and you get a seat at the table somehow, some way. By the way, you feel better about yourself too, because you feel like you're really adding value into your organization, which is really nice. So that is it. And I can certainly take any questions. Theo, how much time do we have left?
We have 25 minutes.
Oh, that's a lot of time.
Yeah,
we've
got a
25
lot
minutes
of
worth of
time.
questions, but
Well, let me start off. One of the ways that I gather data is I always have to figure out what the organization's values are, their goals are, and what's important to the people that are going to make the decisions. But one thing I've found is even though I'm very effective that way, sometimes what their values and goals are don't incorporate or encompass everything that needs to be considered. So, Patty, how do you bring something to the table and say, this isn't part of your current goals, but it needs to be considered?
I would tie it into their current goals somehow. I would somehow find a way to strew a path into it. So, trying to think of an example. So, let's say one of their current goals is growth in, I don't know. What's an example, Thea? I'm like, my brain is not coming up with one.
Okay, with Bausch and Lomb, we wanted to grow our bird watching binoculars 10%.
Okay.
But
that's good for bird watchers.
It's good for bird watchers. However, what they weren't seeing was we were getting some defects through that were going to impact that. It has nothing to do with growing our sales, except it's going to impact the loss. So they were all focused on marketing to growth. And I had to say, wait a minute, we need to look at the quality issues that we're looking at. And they didn't want to hear it, but it was going to impact their goal. I just didn't quite know how to say it at the time. I was very young in my career at that point.
That's a hero role where you're telling somebody something that they just don't want to hear. Like, that is a total hero. Like, you should have a Superman cape for that. Actually, Superwoman cape for that.
I have a Wonder Woman.
Because that is a really hard thing to do. And that's where I would tap into the fear piece in that case of if we don't do this. Because you're right, a poor quality product is going to turn people from the product and from the organization. It's got a double bang to it. Right. And I would tap into probably that piece of it and try and get somebody to hear and understand. I would also try and find a partner, just one person that could be my partner and help me ride that message. Who is it out there that would listen and hear what you had to say and take that part in and tie around that piece of it. Somebody else who could also champion it with you, so to speak. Right. Because that can help as well. It's hard. I mean, I tell people all the time stuff they don't want to hear. And like, I'm yakking away at my company right now about all the stuff all I do all day long is tell them all the stuff we do wrong and, basically aggravate people. Which is not necessarily a fun thing to do, but I put little twists on it and stuff like that. But it's a very hard thing to do, but finding a way to tap into the emotion, finding a way to get them, like, sound an alarm with it, and then getting that partner. Those are the three things I would probably look at doing just based on what I know right now. And figuring out how to get that piece in.
Great, thank you.
That is a hard thing, though, Thea.
It's always hard to tell people things they don't want to hear. But what I've been successful in doing is saying, I have a concern. This is our current plan. This is my concern. This is what I see happening if we don't address it. And this is how I think we can be better if we do address it. So,
I would flip the order of that.
How would you
address this? Then this is what we can do. And then this is why it's detrimental.
That's probably much more effective.
Yeah, I would probably flip it. I don't know, like different personalities. That's where you've got to know the personalities of the people you're talking to, because different personalities want different things. My tendency is to give them the optimistic piece first and then burst their bubble.
Ooh, well, you definitely have the emotion in there.
Yeah. Okay. Like, you can have this, but you can't have it if you don't do this.
is brilliant.
Yeah, that's my little, my little thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
What other questions do we have from everyone? Well, Patty, let me ask you, do you consider yourself CX?
I work in customer experience because that's where I hang on the growth strategy side, but I'm really a growth strategist. Like I look at the business as a business, and a large part of that is because that was how I grew up, and I like my skills were garnished with understanding business. So I'm the person on our team that reads the P&L for our group. I'm the person on our team that reads the company growth strategy for our group. I'm the person on I do all that stuff for our group because that's like that's what I know.
Yeah, that's your
The
super
other
street.
people on our team explain the details of things to me, and they're explaining tech to me because I still don't completely understand tech yet. But that's a two-way street that's happening here. But yeah, my job is to really understand and look at things. My boss sent me a chart recently, and she wanted me to read the chart and tell her what I saw in the chart. And I was like, I read the chart, and in like 5 minutes, and it was like had multi layers in it, and I was like, first of all, this is a terrible chart because who can read this thing? And secondly, when I was finally able to figure it out what it said, which is normally, you can look at a chart and you get it like that, it's
Right.
like you see it, you get it. This took me a few minutes to see and understand, but when I read it, I immediately said, we're missing growth in here, 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 and here. And she's like, how did you do that? And so I explained that to her, like what I saw and how I saw that. And she went back, and then she took that ball and she ran with it, which was great.
Very good.
Yeah,
Very good.
that was awesome. I was so happy that she was able to take that ball and run with it, and it helps our organization.
Right, right. Andrea has a question.
Hi, Patty. I really like the presentation, and at the moment in where I work, I think we're facing something similar, like something. I have this situation where I feel like the leadership is making decisions without being informed or without understanding really what the end consequence or the effect that decision would make. But I feel like what my problem is at the moment is I feel like I'm in a role where I don't have the power of influencing that leadership. So what would you recommend for situations like that when it's not insignificant role, but like you're so little that you look into giants in a way?
Yeah, I call it you're influencing without authority. It's a very big topic out there. There's a lot of thought leaders in this and things like that, and they can give you some pretty good advice. Andrea, I can tell you what's worked for me, and that is when I am influencing without authority, that's where I do take advantage of my partners. Remember on the resource slide, it had the partners piece. I find partners and I build relationships with them. And when I need help, I know I've got them there to help me. I don't sit in my title is Senior Customer Experience Manager. I'm not a director. I'm not anything. And I spend my day with directors and VPs. Like that's how I spend my days. And I'm way further down on the food chain than they are. And like it's my job to figure out how to influence them and get them to go. But part of it is that I build rapport with them, and I push it's hard for me. I am not an extrovert naturally. Like after I'm done with this, I'm not going to talk for the rest of the night, and probably not till like noon tomorrow when everybody in my company wakes up because they're on Pacific time and I'm on Eastern. But I push myself to get out of my own shell and build relationships and rapport with the people that I need to influence. And that makes a really big difference. And then I've got somebody to bounce an idea off of. I've got somebody that's on my side. I've got somebody that understands what I see. I've got somebody that I can debate with. I've got somebody who's going to give me their time. And that more than anything, Andrea, has helped me. Like more than anything else, it's to have those relationships and that rapport with other people. When I worked as an independent consultant, I never I didn't go out and solicit business because I'm terrible at it. Like I could sell, but I can't sell myself. I could sell you guys like this coaster in a second, but I can't go out and sell myself. Like that's not going to happen. But I did it all through referrals. And that was, so I was leveraging my influence at that point in time with other people. And even working as an independent consultant, like you want to have a bunch of people who don't want to hear what you have to say, be an independent consultant. Like nobody wants to hear what you have to say. And my job when they hired me was to go in and help them. Like I was a growth strategist. Like I'm going to help you figure out how to grow. I'm reading financial statements. I'm doing all these different things. And the only way I could do it was to find it like as fast as I can find an ally. And that was like the best thing that I did. There's other things that are out there. And like I said, there's a lot of thought leaders out there on this topic, and you'll find a plethora of information, but that's my number one thing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And like I said, too, I'm a massive introvert, and it's taken me like 6 months to get the courage to speak up in my company. And now, like now that I've got a few allies, like my comfort level has increased greatly, but it's not normal for me to want to do that.
How would you say that are the top things that you do to prepare to talk with somebody to influence others? Like
yeah, those mini stories that I mentioned at the end?
Yeah.
I have pockets of them. Tons
Nice.
and tons of them. And I keep them. And I figure out when I'm going to use them. And literally, like I have them prepared. Like I know what they are, because sometimes I can think on my feet, but not always. So I just I keep them prepared and I keep them ready. And before I go into a meeting with somebody, I protect that like 15 minutes before I go in, and I dig through my mini stories and I make sure I have them ready. And that helps me. So it has gotten me out of more scrapes and more times when I'm just sitting there like, I don't know what to say, but I have a mini story. So I'm ready to go. And literally I have I have a stack of them that I keep, or I'll go back through and I'll look at, today I had a meeting, and before I went into the meeting, my 15 minutes ahead of time, and I went back through and I reviewed all my data that I'd been pulling. And I have like spreadsheets that you guys would be like, oh my God, she's amazing. She has so many great spreadsheets, because I like spreadsheets. But I went back through them. Like nobody else is gonna be able to read these because it's just my like data vomit on them. But like I'll go back through them and I'll look at them and I'll find a few poignant pieces and then plunk that into my mini story. And now I've got statistics to back up my little mini story. And it helps. My company is data driven. Like they want numbers. So I have a hard time explaining to them the qualitative data that I pull together. And so what I figured out finally to do is when I'm pulling qualitative data, I tell them how much qualitative data I read to get to what they're seeing. They're seeing 6 comments. I went through 3,000 to get those 6. And I tell them, yeah, I tell them now. But I learned.
So Patty, whenever you're approaching people, do you identify what their goals and values are, what their motivations are before you approach them to align your stories with what they need, so that you can make that relationship based upon the common thing?
Yeah, I do my homework. Now, I'm not telling you I'm like 100% all the time on this. Be like successful. Like I have my struggles too, and I'm climbing a mountain right now in my company and in my job. But I'm going to get there. And that's a huge part of it, is I believe I'm going to get there. Like come hell or high water, like eventually people are going to listen to me and they're going to be like, holy crap, if we'd have just listened to her sooner.
Yep.
Like I know that, like, and I have confidence in my knowledge and what I know and the data that I can support my commentary with and things like that. But I make it a point to read the OPs and the roadmaps of the divisions that I work with. And I have, I think it's 8. I think I have 8 of them, plus like the overarching one. So I report to our marketplace. My job is with, I don't report to, but I work with our marketplace unit, and there are 8 divisions inside of it. So I read the overarching marketplace, And then I've read all 8 of them, and I have comments and notes and everything like that. So I just done my homework. I know what's important to them. I know what their North Stars are, and I start with their North Star, because then that's how like I get their attention right away. Then they're like, holy crap, she read our stuff, and I'm like, yes, I did. I don't ever have to say it. That's never a conversation, but they know I know.
I want to bring up this.
I don't have great memory retention on things like I used to. It's a combination of things. So like I'll be talking to people and it's like all up on my other screen, or I have Post-its all over the place or something like that. Like there's like, you just can't see what's there.
On the topic,
I don't need notes for, like, I know this presentation inside and out because I live my life this way. But but when I'm sitting in a meeting with somebody and I work via Zoom with people and Google Meet, there's like information in little pieces floating around.
On the topic of making those relationships, I found this book today called it's called You Inc. And it is by Harry Beckworth and Christine Clifford. And it is little vignettes on how to make these relationships and how to find out how to connect yourself. And it's a super easy read. They literally have 1 paragraph chapters. It's just little pieces that you can pull out. But one of the things in there says, have you ever seen somebody that had been in the Marines go talk to somebody else that had been in the Marines and not sell them something? They have something in common. They've got a bond, a reason that they can talk. And it's like, okay, this book, maybe we should talk about it now. Bob Churchill put this in the chat, and I'm going to read it, and it's long. So it says, what are the major operating departments, Patty, you had in your business? How did you work with the major functions that were provided by external vendors? And then there's another section. So let's start with those 2 questions.
Okay, I finally opened up the chat. I didn't have it open. So major operating departments in my business, is that in my current business, Bob, or in my, which?
Well, what I was trying to get at was that you seem to be more in sales and retail, and that may involve stuff coming in, you processing it, and going out, and might not involve super like manufacturing stuff, logistics, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I had to know all that stuff.
Right. I'm sure
in
you
my
did.
retail days, I had to understand manufacturing. I had to understand logistics. I had to understand customs. I can tell you how a floor gets waxed. Like I can tell you how an air conditioner gets replaced. Like I know all kinds. Like it was my job as the general manager. Like anything that happened that had to do with the building, I had to learn about it and know about it. I think I have a natural tendency to lean more toward the customer. And in that growth piece, like that's just really where my natural tendencies go, is into that. It's what I do in my job today. It's really help the organization understand. I don't like now I'm selling ideas. Like that's all I do all day long. But it's just and the ideas I'm selling are to help our organization hit growth. So it's a struggle for me, quite frankly, right now, to understand the tech world and understand when they're talking about like a PMGR, like I still don't completely understand what that means. I'm starting to finally understand what a QT is. I've just learned what a sunset is. So, but understanding and being able to speak the language of the people that I'm working with is a very big deal. And I spend time listening to, I work with directors and VPs and things like that, and they came up the product manager route. So I spend my time listening to, I listen to podcasts with product managers because I'm learning how to speak their language. And I'm not great at it yet, but I will be someday, at least better than I am today. And I look at where I was 6 months ago, but learning and understanding and being able to speak their language, that's a very big deal.
Patty, I don't know if it would be beneficial to you, but the Pragmatic Institute trains product owners. Oh. And I bet you they would have the vocabulary you're looking for.
Product Institute?
Pragmatic Institute.
Pragmatic, shoot. Got it wrong.
And they have some things that you can access without taking any of their courses, but they do have a foundations course that, had I the money and time, I would do it. I think it's about $1,400 to take the basics. But check it out and see if it's even what you're looking for before you get there.
Okay. Well, my favorite 4-letter word is free. So
Mine too. Mine too.
that's
But
my
they do have
favorite.
they do have some free things, and they also have office hours, which people that have taken courses get together and ask questions,
Cool.
and they have a presenter. Office hours is free, regardless if you've taken courses with them or not.
Oh, that's really neat. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just, and I'm going to my partners inside the organization and I'm just asking, I'm like, I don't, can you put this in a language I can understand? And then I'll put it, then I can start putting things in languages you understand.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm just asking them. Like, this is not the time for me to be prideful and pretend like I know, or go like somebody's talking about something and I'm like sitting over here digging it up. I just ask.
It's very good to just ask.
And it's almost like I'm humble toward them to be like, can you educate me? Help me
Right.
help you.
Yes, that's what we do. I like to call it my Columbo persona. Help me understand what's going on here. I just need to understand. Hopefully they just tell me.
Yeah.
Okay, we're at our last 4 minutes. Does anyone have any questions before we close it out? Well, show Patty some love in the chat at least. And we will help you any way we can, Patty. If you want to reach out to any of us, we'll do what we can.
Well, thank you guys so much. And I have so much respect for what you guys do. It's like, none of us could do our jobs without you guys. So please know that you are so appreciated.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for everything you do. And the other thing I'll tell you is I can present all this to you, but this is something I work at. I don't think anybody's got this thing down pat. So I can tell you what has worked, what I've read, what I've learned, what other people have taught me. But this is like, to me, it's always a constant work in progress.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, this will be uploaded to YouTube within a few days. So if you want to say I presented to them, here's the link. It's going to be available. And we really appreciate you presenting your perspective. Next week, we have someone else talking about UI and UX. She comes from academia. So it's going to be a different perspective on something that's a tiny bit similar. But it's something we all need to be aware of. So thank you so much, Patty. And we will see y'all next week. Reach out if you have any questions, folks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.